I beat this mascot in a fight, episode 17. We are moving on to college and we're taking on the Big Ten. First up, we have the Indiana Hoosiers. The word Hoosier means someone that's from Indiana, like Larry Bird or Ron Swanson. But Indiana doesn't have an official mascot. Decades ago, the school trotted out a bulldog and then a border collie, but none of those ideas stuck. And then years later, in the late 70s, they brought out this big-headed bozo, Mr. Hoosier Pride. And even the school hated him. This is what the Indiana student newspaper said about him at the time. Even though the Hoosiers don't have an official mascot, I am choosing to fight Mr. Hoosier Pride because he makes me that angry. Win. Speaking of underachieving basketball teams, the Iowa Hawkeyes are up next. This here is Herky the Hawk, whose mouth is unfortunately permanently stuck in that position. Little does Herky know is that I have a dynamite record against birds, and Herky is no exception. Win. The last fight is against the Illinois Fighting Illini, and this is a tricky one. Illinois, like many other colleges, is in the midst of a nickname and mascot controversy. Chief Illinois used to be the Illini mascot, but a couple of years ago, the university decided to explore different options and move away from Chief. There's been a lot of push for Illinois to use his belted kingfisher as its new nickname and mascot. So like Indiana, Illinois does not have an official mascot. I would not beat Chief Illinois in a fight because he is a true warrior, but I do like my odds against a kingfisher. So we'll just call this one a tie. I beat this mascot in a fight, part 18, part 2 of the Big Ten. Leading off, we have the Maryland Terrapins. Using your context clues, you probably figured out that a terrapin is a turtle. And this guy right here is their mascot, Testudo the Turtle. While Testudo looks like a total dweeb, I do think he will pose for a tough matchup. If I could get him on his back, I think I'll win, because then he would just be wobbling around and kicking his little turtle eggs. But that's easier said than done, as Testudo has a very solid shell, which would be difficult to puncture. Plus, I respect Scott Van Pelt way too much to fight the Maryland Terrapins, and I don't want to be made fun of live on SportsCenter. Next up, we have the Michigan Wolverines. So Michigan, like apparently every single school in the Big Ten, does not have an official mascot. Evidently, in the 1920s, they used to trot out two living, breathing Wolverines named Bernie and Biff, which sounds about as dangerous as trying to shake Juwan Howard's hand. But then years later, they trotted out this big dink. So I am going to try and actively avoid fighting Juwan Howard or the two living Wolverines, and instead fight this dude. Win. Finally, we have Michigan State and their mascot, Sparty. Not a good round for you, boy, because not only does Sparty have protective shields, but he's also absolutely yoked. The guy has a 12-pack. Sparty has definitely done steroids in the past, and I want zero part of that roid rage. But I beat this mascot in a fight, part 19. Part 3 of the Big Ten. Leading off, we have the Minnesota Golden Gophers and their buck-toothed rodent mascot, Goldie. I am going to give Goldie a gigantic knuckle sandwich right between those enormous chompers. Yes, I have seen the clip of Goldie absolutely obliterating children on the football field. But am I supposed to think this is impressive? Of course Goldie has to beat up on 10-year-olds. Because anytime Minnesota plays an actual formidable opponent, guess what happens? They get boat raced. But this is a win. Next up, we have the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Nebraska rotates between two different mascots, Herbie Husker and this bozo Lil Red. Herbie Husker is a corn-fed country boy that would absolutely beat me in a fight. But Lil Red is just a gigantic baby, who I am defeating handily because he's a baby. We're going with the split for this one. Fight number 3 is Willie the Wildcat from Northwestern. Normally, I would be absolutely petrified of a wildcat, but come on, look at Willie. Look at that face. No one is afraid of Willie the Wildcat. And finally, we have the Ohio State Buckeyes and their legendary mascot, Brutus. Win! Guys, Brutus is just a gigantic nut. Like, if I kick him one time, he's going to be on his knees in sheer pain. Fellas, you know what I'm talking about. I beat this mascot in a fight, part 20. The finale of the Big Ten. Leading off, we have the Nittany Lion of Penn State. This might be the worst mascot I have ever seen. Seriously. First off, you're a lion. And you're Penn State University. You're a Big Ten school. You are a legendary football program. How is it possible that a school of that size has the budget and the creativity to come up with this? This is a child's Halloween costume from the 1950s. And it doesn't even have a name. It's just called the Nittany Lion. In any other situation, I would be mortified of fighting a lion. But this one is absolutely pathetic. Win. Fight number 2 is Purdue Pete. And let me tell you what, I hate Purdue and their mascot, Purdue Pete. No one cares about my bracket, but I did finally have an opportunity to actually win a March Madness pool this year. And all Purdue needed to do is get to the Final Four, which involved beating a 15 seed, and they lost. You stink, Purdue Pete. I'm going to drop kick you in each of your gigantic black hole eyes, you weasel. Fight 3, we have Bucky Badger from Wisconsin. I am riding an absolute hot streak right now because of the vengeance I have on Purdue Pete. I'm wiping the floor with Bucky. Though Bucky is a legend, and I do think he actually would put up a pretty good fight, just like Wisconsin, when the bright lights come on, guess what happens? Win. The last Big Ten fight is the Rutgers Scarlet Knight. Though the Scarlet Knight is a Dollar Tree version of Sparty, I will be taking a loss here. I don't do too well against mascots with giant helmets and swords. A really good round, but this one's a loss. Hit the follow for more mascot fights and fun facts on sports.